Order?
We don't, yeah, Phil Peters is here somewhere.
Okay, we're going to wait just a couple minutes.
I forgot, yeah, there he is. Thank you, Chuck.
Director Ittner will not be with us. Director Vallejo? Are you
I'm
on?
here.
Very good, we can hear you. Okay, it is 10:04, and we will now call this meeting to order. We'll begin with item number 2, adoption of the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Ittner. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, public comment on closed session. There are no public members in the audience, so do we have any public comment on the phones? Seeing none, we will now move into closed session. We will now resume with the open session. And we'll begin with a report out on closed session with Attorney Keith Lemieux.
Yeah, and I actually have a report out of closed session this time. First, I would refer to the land use acquisition, real property acquisition item. The board received a report from the negotiators. No reportable action took place there. In addition, there was no reportable action on the other litigation items identified except for the groundwater adjudication matter, which is identified as the last one on the list. That is something I have to report on. The board took action in closed session by a vote of 3-0. Director Ittner is not present. Director Griffin abstained from participating. So that left the remaining directors to vote on it. They voted unanimously to direct that the groundwater authority apply to serve as class counsel for the small pumper class and the groundwater adjudication. So let me explain a little bit about what that means. So as everybody's aware, there's currently a groundwater adjudication that was filed by the water district. Well, it was made into a general adjudication by the water district. The purpose of that litigation is to identify the groundwater allocations of all pumpers in the valley. Because the jurisdiction needed to be asserted over the federal government and the Navy, it was required to be a comprehensive adjudication, meaning that all people who produce water or would claim to produce water from the valley have to be included as parties to the adjudication. There are approximately 832 private wells that extract from the basin. Collectively, they account for maybe 10% of the sustainable yield of the basin. And those parties are parties to the litigation but have not retained counsel or are not present in the litigation. And in fact, are technically in default. So there is a provision of the Streamlined Adjudication Act that allows for individuals to apply to the court to be removed from the case if they're determined to be de minimis pumpers. That provision raised alarm with the federal government because if that was acted upon by a sufficient number of parties, and it would no longer be a comprehensive adjudication. The court would lack jurisdiction over the matter, and there would be no lawsuit. So the parties in court on a couple status conferences spent some time trying to get their head around how to resolve that conundrum. And a solution that was offered by the water district's attorney was to take default judgments against all of the parties that hadn't appeared, meaning the court would enter a judgment against anybody who does not have a lawyer and has not yet appeared in the case. That struck counsel for the GA as unfair and unreasonable, and so the GA attorney requested that the court consider instead appointing a class counsel for those parties so that their interests would be represented in court. After some discussion, the GA recognized that probably the most cost-effective and efficient way to represent that class was to have the GA do it, because the GA does not have a water rights claim and therefore has no conflict of interest and could reasonably do it. So the board then voted to have the GA apply to be class counsel. That motion will be filed with the court tomorrow as directed by the court, and it will be heard on November 3rd, I believe. That, there is, in addition to that, that concludes my report about that matter. There is another item related to the groundwater adjudication that's going to come up actually in the Capital Corps report later, related to the passage and signature of AB 779, but we'll talk about that one when we get to it. So that concludes my report, unless there's any. I'm not going to go through any questions because of the attorney-client confidences, so that concludes the report on that topic.
Very good, thank you. Okay, next we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll all stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we will have roll call.
Chairman Hayman,
Present.
Present.
Vice Chair Peters,
Present. Present.
Director Griffin,
Present. Present.
Director Vallejo,
Present. Present.
Director Itnire.
Okay, moving to item number. So we're getting a little feedback on the speakers here. I don't know. Is it quit? Okay, I think we're clear now. Okay, moving to item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Do we have any public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item number 7, board member comments.
Sure, I'd like to just make the general announcement that the BLM has an open scoping period for the joint environmental assessment EIR that we're doing on behalf of the Groundwater Authority. We have a 30-day comment period that ends November 4th for those of you in the audience. We sent out a couple hundred emails and some letters indicating such. So this is for the pipeline from Cal City to Ridgecrest project, and you can find the documents and make comments through eplanning.blm.gov, or you can. There is a press release also that BLM has on its website. So for those that are interested.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a formal announcement. Apologize for missing last month's meeting. I had an emergent requirement come up. But I just want to announce the COSO geothermal funding results for this fiscal year. Brief the projects to the installation. Unfortunately, they didn't select any of the projects that were submitted by the GA. We had a lot of potable water distribution projects that had to be prioritized higher, both at like the intermediate reservoir located on Interkern Road, as well as some things out at the propulsion lab that we just had to fix this year. So that's where those funds went for this next year. But appreciate this, the submissions, and look forward to seeing some in future years so that we can consider them.
Very good, thank you. Any other board member comments? Okay, moving on to item number 8, consent agenda. This will consist of items 8A, approve minutes of the board meeting September 13th, 2023, and items 8B, approve the expenditures of be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Does any member of the board wish to have any item pulled? Any member of the public wish to have any item pulled? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, moving on to item.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye. Aye.
Director Itmeyer. Motion carries.
Okay, item number 9, board review and approval of the 2024 budget. And that will be with our general manager, Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we have a PowerPoint just to give you some highlights of the budget. But before I go into that, let me just say that there is in your packet a brief staff report. If I can get everything set up here. Which we'll run through the highlights of it here shortly, but you'll see the budget is pretty comprehensive as far as how it's put together. Our total revenues for fiscal year, which is actually also calendar year 2024, is 6.23 million. Those are our projected expenditures with the revenues at 6.85. But let's go ahead and just kind of look at the PowerPoint. There we go. So this provides you with a brief overview, telling you that the total projected revenue is 6.85 million. You'll see that a good portion of the projected revenue is actually in grant funds. We had actually predicted some funds from Navy COSO, but it sounds like maybe that won't be the case for 2024. But at any rate, we have from our DWR grant that accounting for approximately a third of our revenue for the year. Also notable is that the revenue in our augmentation fee is considerably less than it has been in previous years, and that is due to a projected decrease in water production, primarily from the water district. And we'll go to the next slide. This just shows how the revenues are broken out through the extraction fee, the augmentation fee, and the shallow well mitigation fee. So this removes the grants and just shows the fee portion of our revenues. Next slide. This focuses on our proposed expenses, and you'll see again that our expenditures associated with our grant work, our project, comprise a large portion of our expenses. So we have, we're budgeting $2.5 million towards the Sigma Round 2, the Sigma IP grant, not Round 2. And then we're also expecting to initiate some work under the new Urban Communities Drought Relief Grant in 2024. Let's go to the next slide. And this just shows again how those, it shows how we split the money between the funds. Beginning and ending balance is basically what we're projecting to collect through the various funds. Particularly, this shows that we have to transfer in some money from to the extraction fund from the augmentation fund in order to balance. So we're anticipating a transfer or loan of $701,000 from the augmentation fund to the extraction fund to help us balance our budget. Next. Again, just a depiction of how much of our revenues is coming from our Department of Water Resources grants. Next. This identifies our outstanding obligations that we're working towards. You'll see the city of Ridgecrest has provided us in-kind services, and this goes back quite a few years. Now, we're also working on a repayment for those costs, and we, as you'll see, the $500,000 there, we're working to complete for this year. December will be the last payment, so September, October, November, December is when those payments are being made to complete the $500,000. And then we have our interfund loans, the next section, where we're documenting what we're borrowing from the augmentation fund into the extraction fund so that we can pay those back at a later date. Next. This just identifies that we are expecting to repay the city, again, $500,000 towards those in-kind services in 2024. And this is just another way to show you the budget, which shows that we have balanced it by making that transfer from the augmentation fund to the extraction fund. So you'll see in that first column where it says restricted extraction, the second number is 701,000, and that reflects that transfer into the extraction out of augmentation. And so the next several slides just show you the extended budget. We can just go through that, I think. Yeah, and the various line items are identified. But then let's go back, just go back one. And then you'll see that transfer out of the augmentation fund here is reflected. So this is just a budget that identifies that transfer is being made. And let's see what's left. Is there any, let's go to the next one. Okay, and this just shows the bottom line. There's our total balanced budget. And let's go to the next slide. Okay. So I know I went through it fairly quickly, but it was, I feel, pretty straightforward. And I'm happy to answer any questions or go back to any of those slides as you like.
Thank you, Carol. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments from the board.
I have a couple.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll wait.
Go ahead, Director Vallejo.
Carol, I was just wondering if you can give us an update on how our projected revenues for the COSO funding aren't going to come through. It sounds like how that is going to the budget you've put.
We had budgeted some money to do the work, and I'm not sure, and maybe I misunderstood the commander, but I thought you said that we would not receive funding for 2024?
That's correct. No new funding for 2024.
So we have some money budgeted for those projects, but it sounds like we won't be receiving it. And let's look at that item.
So Carol, we won't do the projects.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
So do we need to?
Sorry, this is April Kegwin. I just wanted to clarify that the funds that are budgeted are previously awarded funds. We just have yet to receive them. And that was for this year's award, not what we predicted for award next year.
This is already, so what we have for 2024 has already been awarded and approved?
Yes, that was awarded. The commander can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe earlier this year. We are working through some document issues, I believe, on the federal filing website. So I've been speaking with a gentleman named Kevin McGinnis, who's been helping me rework those.
Okay, that's starting to all add up for me. So April, if you need help with that, I can engage with Kevin, because I know that was something we had to do in the first place. But those were for the 2 wells that were drilled.
Right.
That would be correct.
Monitoring wells in Rose Valley. So that's what that funding is for.
So it's a problem if we haven't given you that funding left yet, because the work's pretty much done as far as I'm tracking.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, April. I didn't realize that that funding hadn't actually come over yet, so.
So then it doesn't look like we need to make any changes to this proposed annual budget because that funding in particular is already in place. It's just a future budget would not include that type of funding and that type of project. So that's for a later date.
That's correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Director Griffin?
I just have a couple questions. Looking at the augmentation fund, there was one chart, I think, that showed that 208,000 previous had been borrowed, and then it looks like another 700,000. So I just want to make sure how that's getting paid back, or if is that the total amount that has been borrowed from that fund so far, or?
There is a table here, and I'm going to try to find it in the packet that shows our outstanding obligations. And the purpose of us tracking it and identifying it that way specifically is to be able to repay it. So let me find that. Okay, augmentation fund. Balance. Outstanding obligations. Sorry, my computer's not, it's not cooperating the way I'd like it to. Adopted, so we have our adopted 2023 obligation payments. That wasn't what I was looking for. Oh. There we go. So what we have listed here are outstanding obligations, and where it says augmentation fund, these are obligations that we are looking to repay that fund that we've had to make transfers from, or we anticipate making transfers from the augmentation fund to the extraction fund, just to cover those costs. But they're tracked here because eventually they'll be repaid to that fund. And so you'll see here what the number is on this sheet that says outstanding obligations in the budget packet. Under augmentation fund, the total is about 1.5 million. And that includes the anticipated transfer for this year of 700.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. That's what I was curious. Okay, and then also, I'm a little concerned when we went over the C&E plan and we discussed that, implementing that we didn't have enough budgeted for this current fiscal year. And so I want to make sure we have enough for this year.
Sorry to interrupt. You were just giving us the note. If you could speak into the
Oh,
mic.
okay.
Stop picking it up.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
So I was concerned. I wanted to make sure that we had enough money in the budget for the C&E plan to move forward with some of the engagement.
I think between what we're doing this year, we have expenditures planned for this year, and we have additional expenditures planned for next year. So you'll see in the budget under community and it says community and engagement. There's what, 25, about $50,000 budgeted total. We also have about the same or so this year, and we're going to be working primarily on the website improvements this year, which is going to be, a larger chunk. And then I think what we see here should be enough to get us working in the right direction. Now, if there's any really large projects, it might not cover that, and that's not really what was anticipated when we went through the recommendations from The PAC, I think we were looking at primarily the website improvements. We were looking at, fact sheets and FAQs and a lot of electronic documents that we could post to the website. They made some recommendations, I think, such as adding some staff or allocating staff. We didn't really put that into the budget in terms of additional money for staff. What we're trying to do is work with what we have in terms, existing staff, so that we're mindful of our budget. But we're trying to ensure that we have enough additional funds allocated for what those activities would cost.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, and then the last question I have, did I misunderstand you, or the city's previous amount would be paid back in December? Is that what you said?
The $500,000 that we have budgeted for repayment this year, it's in this year's budget, will be paid back with a final payment in December.
Okay.
So, but we owe more than that. They've been providing in-kind services since, I think, 2016. So there was an accumulation of fees associated with those in-kind services. And so this is our first year that we've made an effort to start to repay the city. So we will be completing what's in our budget in December. That's $500,000. We have another $500,000 in the budget for 2024 allocated to, again, address repayment. And after that, it'll help us sort of catch up, because the city fronts the cost of some of our legal services, as well as the use of the council chambers and some other fees.
Okay, so is it possible to get a list of what that is? Because I'd like to see that. I know the water district and the county have both been reimbursed for the $500,000. And I understand the city, but just to issue another $500,000 as a blanket that they've gave $1 million now in in-kind services.
Sure. Oh, no, they send us, they actually update the billing every month. So we have those records, and you're absolutely welcome to see them.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it for now.
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Okay, seeing none, any public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none. We'll bring it back to the board for adoption of the presented budget and a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, approval of the USBR Title 16 feasibility study, water recycling plant. This will be with Capital Corps.
Morning, members of the board. This is Michael McKinney with Capital Corps Group. On October the 2nd, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation notified the authority of its intent to approve the Title 16 feasibility study associated with the water recycling plant. This approval makes the water recycling plant eligible for federal funding for up to 25% of the total costs. Couple precursors on this. While decisions are needed at this time, they are not needed immediately. So similar to the presentation that we brought you concerning funding for the Interconnection Authority, we have sort of the same thing. You can take this and kind of digest it over the course of 1 or 2 months. If it is the board's direction to seek funding in 2024, as you will see during the presentation, we will need that direction by the December meeting at the very latest. And that will, in turn, cause some other actions, as we'll see here in the presentation. I'm going to be assisted in this presentation by both Stetson Engineering and by the legal team who helped put this together. And if I can go to the first slide, please. So some points to consider. We tried to do an apples to apples comparison, present you the same type of information that you were presented in the interconnection pipeline project and present it here for your consideration as you make these decisions. This is a preliminary cost estimate to support funding requests through the Title 16 feasibility study, as well as any other grants or state money that might come up and become available. The cost estimate, just like the interconnection project, is somewhere between, it could be dead on, or it could be up to 20% more or up to 30% less. It is still in the very preliminary stages. Because of any federal involvement in this project, it will be subject to the Buy America, Build America provisions that were included in the infrastructure bill. That will increase timelines. It will also increase demand costs, as we have seen in other projects. Those are included in the cost estimate that has been provided to you. The estimate was completed by Stetson Engineers. And these estimates are based upon the design contained within the GSP and also the designs and discussions that have been ongoing between the authority and the water district. If I can have the next slide. The timeline of how all of this came up. Essentially, board approval was given to us in 2022 to seek and submit a Title 16 feasibility report. Stetson Engineers began working on that feasibility study. And in January, a completed feasibility study, as you may remember, was put onto the board for FYI and was submitted to USBR. This feasibility study also basically did an updated cost estimate at that time as required. And at the request of the board, Capital Corps did go into USBR headquarters and request an expedited timeline. And I will say this, only one revision was requested by USBR, which is fairly unusual, but also a testament to how complete the feasibility study was. And we received, essentially within 9 months, a approval of that feasibility study. What happens next is that is essentially a 3-year authorization under Title 16. There is $5.3 million in immediate need for planning funding associated with the project. And then, as I stated before, Title 16 allows for 25% federal share, but that means 75% of the plant costs need to come from the state or the local residents. So it has to be borne by the local agency or from the state funding. And again, if we're going to seek funding in 2024, we need to know November, no later than December, in order to meet associated application funding and timeline. Next slide, please. The cost analysis for the plant. As you recall, in August, we presented to you a cost estimate on the plant. That's a total cost estimate of $140,240,000. The annual O&M costs on that are $3.2 million. That does include, by the way, a 4% carrying charge for the financed amounts of the plant. So if we were to go ahead and have to finance portions of the plant, that does include a 4% carrying cost on that. The expected return flow of recycled water is based upon today's schedule. That is 1573 acre feet per year. So with all of the city effluent coming out of the wastewater treatment plant, currently coming in to a tertiary treatment facility and being recycled, it would net about 1573 per year. That differs from the August number that I gave you and that number is based upon a 1% growth in the city of Ridgecrest per year. And that would take you up to 2,223 acre feet per year. If you were to take today's cost per acre foot of recycled water, it would be $6,600 per acre foot. If you make the assumption that the growth projections are correct, that will lower it down to just shy of $3,500 an acre foot, as provided and reported to you in the August report. Under Title 16, a maximum share for the plant would be $35 million, and the non-federal share would be approximately $105 million. Immediate need, that means the non-federal share of planning costs would be $3.9 million, and the non-federal share of construction costs would be $101 million. Any questions on the cost analysis?
This is Chairman Hayman. On the O&M costs, those are factored in with the total plant cost to derive the 66.74 cost per acre foot?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, this is Jeff Helsley from Stetson.
Yes.
I may have relayed that information to you incorrectly. The $3.2 million is the operation and maintenance cost, the power cost, replacing things, doing routine maintenance, and that's the average O&M cost over the life of the project. That does not include repayment of the capital costs.
But it did include the 4% financing charge, correct?
No, that's strictly O&M.
Then I stand corrected, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
And I may have not presented that to you correctly, Michael, because you got that from us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Any further questions from the board?
None.
If not, I'll have the next slide. What is in that total cost of $140 million? Essentially, what is in there is the planning phase of the project, which gets us to engineering and design up to 60%, the RO right-of-way permitting that might be needed, and our environmental permitting completion. Then the physical portions of the plant include a tertiary treatment facility, advanced treatment facilities, as well as then any ancillary facilities in the injection wells needed to get the water back into the groundwater table. How does that cost break down? Essentially, in the planning stage, $5.3 million, as I said. The tertiary treatment plant is now at $8.8 million. The advanced treatment is at $84 million. And then the injection wells and ancillary facilities is about $47 million. There are no questions. I'll continue on to Title 16. Again, this provides funding for planning and construction for a total of 25% of the plant's costs. The feasibility study can be somewhat akin to what we discussed regarding a WRDA 7001 process, in that a report is provided to Congress that will list the feasibility study as having been approved. With that approval, then we are become eligible for the funding. And then we are also subject, of course, to annual appropriations amounts that will be provided by the Congress through the Energy and Water Development Act. That funding can be grant, or it can be what they call programmatic funds, or agency funds that are specified to the project and appropriated by the Congress. If you go to the next slide, what are the next steps? Before entering a funding agreement with USBR, we're going to need to demonstrate an ability to cover the non-federal share of the costs. And then we need direction regarding fiscal 24 or fiscal 25. It is at the purview of the board to actually say, we want to wait until fiscal 25. We would like Stetson to work with USBR over the course of calendar year 2024 to determine what funding, programmatic or grant, may become available. And then we will go after the grants in calendar year 2025. That is allowed under the project. We will not be reported to Congress until 2024, about mid-year to third quarter. So we do have some time. In addition, there needs to be a purchase agreement with the city for the effluent that comes out of the wastewater treatment plant. And then there needs to be an allocation agreement for the recycled water. Lastly, and this is a caution that I will give the board, any substantive changes to the design or the water's use may subject this project to re-review, a new feasibility study. Any substantial revision to the cost estimate will also have to go through USBR review and approval. What they approved in the feasibility study was that the costs were in line with what they believed that a plant of this nature would cost, and that it was technologically feasible to get the water from the wastewater treatment plant through and pump it back down into the ground. So they determined that engineering-wise, it is a feasible project. And they said that the costs associated with that were also within the realm of what they thought were reasonable. They did not do a cost-benefit analysis in this. It just simply says, yes, we agree with your cost estimate. From there, I will answer any questions, but I also would like to turn it over to council for a moment to talk about the what is needed in terms of agreements, and also what would be needed in terms of adoption of some sort of a fee structure or a way for the authority to pay for the plant. And I'm not sure if Keith or Phil are going to handle that.
That's going to be Phil Hall. He's making his way up.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon or late morning, 7 minutes left. Board, so the first, as you'd heard, there has to be an agreement. Right now, we do not have a full agreement with the city. We have an option to take the it's somewhat treated. Let's start from where this water goes. Water goes into your sewer system. It goes to a treatment plant that the city has to have to treat the water. It's currently being, new one being built. And that water is then treated to a position at which it's essentially put in ponds and it evaporates because our basin doesn't percolate. This process would take the water from those ponds, put it into another facility that treats it further, and then puts it into the ground. We do not have an agreement to take the water out of the ponds and put it into this. That would be an agreement we'd have to work with the city. If the water district was interested in using that water and taking that water and putting it into their system, they need to enter into an agreement. That agreement also needs to be on equal terms available to anybody else in the basin who wants to use that water. At least that's the position taken by the litigation partner of the water district, Mojave Pistachio, who's filed 2 causes of action asserting that the GA has already assigned this water to the water district, which we have not. But that's their assertion, and they asserted that we did it without considering them. That's why they've sued us on 2 causes of action under that assertion. Again, it's not a correct assertion as we're hearing now. We don't even have an agreement with the water district. That agreement would have to occur. The real main parties with that are the city, the water district. The GA is part of that if we're going to count it as our water source. So that's one thing. We got to get the molecules. Then we have to pay for this. If it wasn't clear before, we'll go back a little bit. We have, at this GA a couple months ago, determined essentially that a recycle project was infeasible because of its costs, and you've seen the costs of this. When that was done, and I say essentially because there was no formal vote, but when that was done, this grant project was already circling, and it was out there, and it had been asked for. From that day to a week ago, we got the yes, a week ago, you could move forward this way. To move forward with this, we need to come up with, your slide's not up there, Michael, so I'm going to have the numbers a little off, but let's call it roughly $4 million for the first part of the project. And then 80 million plus the loan costs for the second part of the project within a year. To cover the first 4 million, you're going to need a fee structure pretty quick. That slide right there. So to cover the first part, which is the study, this $5 million study, of which, we're going to need to come up with 4 million of it, we would need to immediately start talking to a bank, because I don't know if anybody has $4 million to put out there towards this. And again, this is going, we presume, to the water district, as nobody else has really, nobody else, period, has put out that they're interested in this water. So we're considering the water district because they're the only one that's talked to us about it. You have to come up with $4 million to do the study. Then at this time next year, actually before this time next year, you're going to have a funding source for the rest of those total project costs. On top of that, if you're going to head down this path, you need to be able to expect to pay the O&M costs, as those are pretty well fixed costs that you'll have to pay every year. That's, what is $3,500 an acre foot, Michael?
That's correct.
So that's what you're looking at. You got to move forward right now on adopting a fund to pay for the study. You have to be willing to commit to adopt a fund to pay for the $140 million in project costs within a year, and commit to pay the O&M costs. If you're trying to fund it next year, you need to start moving forward on all of this now, as your time frames are limited by 218, et cetera. Plus you got to get to a bank, et cetera. So you have a couple weeks. You don't have to decide today, but every day that you waste is less time that you have to get your 218 prepared. You need to start talking to loan people now while you're processing your fee. So you don't need to make a final choice today, but if this is something that is considered a potentiality, you would need to be directing staff to start working on it quickly. You're not making any choices, you're not adopting a fee today, you're not doing any of that, but you are telling staff this is something you're considering, something that you believe is a viable option, and that the community can afford the O&M costs of this project, plus the study costs, plus the construction costs, to return 1,500 acre foot to the basin. And again, you'd need to start moving forward, at least at a staff level now. 218 is going to take at least 3, probably 4 to 5 months from the time you really start the process. So, you've got to move forward. I think you could do a dual line track of talking to your lenders while you're doing the 218, but that process needs to start. If there's any questions that I haven't addressed, feel free to ask.
I don't really have any questions for Mr. Hall. I just want to make a couple comments, and you may have an answer, so if you'll stick around. But as Mr. Hall alluded to earlier, 2 months ago, I went back and watched the meeting after seeing this in the agenda. And I thought as a board, we pretty much decided that it was not cost effective to do this. And the water district would still be interested in doing a project. And we were given permission at that time by this board to move forward and speak with Stetson about working on a project with the city for wastewater. But to vote on this today or to take an action on this, I feel is premature. I mean, we had pretty much said this was not a feasible way to go, and so I don't think that we could actually put that into fruition today. It's just, I think there's much better benefits on how this water can be used, whether it be through being treated mildly and then, finding out how much base of the water is used by the base for construction, and by the residents of this valley, and there's other things we could do to put that water to use in this valley. So I'm up on, am I not on it?
It's got to be right in front of you.
So I just think there's a lot, for 1,500 acre feet of water, I think we can use it more beneficially if we talk about putting a couple J stands and we run a short pipeline to use that water for construction water instead of using potable water. Like currently, there's 3 J stands on the base that are used, and that's where everybody goes to get their water. And so we know that's when we do a project on the base. So if we there's a pipeline going by 2 of them right now currently. So if that water was treated just a little bit more, we could be using that water for all of their projects and use it for the projects in the city. And then we could put that water to use, not use potable water, and not have to pay the expense of using injection and all that stuff. So there's several options that we can look at. I think if the district and the city could get together and come up with some type of a plan, we could make a project that would work at a much less cost than 160 million or so. So that's my opinion.
If I can, I think, answer some questions in there and maybe make some things a little clearer. This money, this grant program, was requested over a year ago. During that time, further study was done as to what this program would look like, and we have better cost estimates. A couple months ago, to kind of put it simply, we decided that this thing was too costly. I should say we did. It was informally, kind of more or less. We saw the numbers and this doesn't work. Is this sort of a project? And this sort of a project is taking the water, injecting it into the ground so it can be used for drinking water again. It's not a construction water project. It's a drinking water project, which is one way you can use your effluent. So that project was out there. That grant system was out there. Between the time that the board informally considered it and went, this just doesn't really pencil out for, I think, obvious financial reasons here, we got word that this grant and study process and 25% match came through. So we can't just at staff level say, nope, they already passed on that. We need to present it to you. It sounds like the water district, who would be the recipient of this and be responsible for these fees, is not supportive of a project like this that puts the water into the aquifer at these costs and returns 1,500 acre foot. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you are interested in maybe a potential other project, which would be purple pipe to areas and or, which part of that would also be construction water, purple pipe's construction water. That's a separate project. And how much water that returns, I mean, how much water does the water district use each year in construction water?
And that's what we would need to find out, and what the Navy uses, and we need to know those answers, so.
Well, we wouldn't have that information the water district would have, which is why I'm asking the question, what is the amount of water currently used for construction purposes through the water district?
And I will have to find that answer.
Okay. That will obviously have a cost component. That's a different project. That's not this project. But if we are talking about injecting water into the aquifer to increase the return to the aquifer, therefore increasing the amount that can be pumped out and used, that's what this project is, and these are the costs, and we've looked at them before and informally said they don't work. But at the same point, we had an offer of 25% grant through this project, so we've brought it back.
And in light of our discussion last month, this is probably the point where I jump in and say, we're not approving or considering a project, any project right now. This is just trying to figure out how we're going to respond to this. We got a yes on grant money, and this is a question of whether we're going to take it in order to do the preliminary process to determine whether or not we should have a project of this kind.
Yeah. And it just doesn't make sense to me to borrow $4 million to get a grant for $1.3 million, just to look at something we've already determined that wasn't feasible. So I understand we did get a grant for $4 million, or for $2 million, but we're going to spend $4.
Yeah, and that part of it is a policy decision, but just understand that the reason that staff brought this forward is we've got this, we asked for it, we got a yes, and now we're presenting it to you.
Thank you, sir. Michael, did you have anything else to add on?
No, I think that concludes my presentation. I do, based upon the discussion that is happening, and again, this does not need to be decided today, a staff direction on what to tell USBR as our next steps is probably going to be warranted. And please recognize that as we did request an expedited review, and that was supported by elected officials at the board's direction. So be mindful of that as we have that discussion.
Okay, any other board comments? Any public comment from the floor? Any public comment on the phones? Okay, so I'll bring it back to the board. Well, we don't have to make a definitive decision. Do we want to give any opinion or go ahead to continue on with that communication between Stetson and the USBR and to look at it later in 2025 or 24, 25? My question was if that was the case, would we still have to come up with a $3.9 million, showing ability to fund that? But, I mean, my opinion is this is not a feasible project, and I don't really see any benefit of pursuing it, but I'm open to any other comments from the board.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I would, as far as how we phrase it, I'm not sure. I'll defer to Director Griffin on that, but I think from the sounds of it, and as Mr. McKinney was saying, because this was expedited, it's probably best that we give an answer sooner rather than later. If we know that this isn't something we're interested in, I think it's probably best that we say that and move forward. But again, I'll defer to Director Griffin if
Are you
this
comfortable
is,
with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. I'm comfortable with it, and that's kind of the direction I was alluding to. Any other comments from other board members?
This is Jonathan. I was initially confused about why it came back, so thank you all staff for that explanation as to why it came back, because I wasn't sure what had changed since our last conversation about it. So it sounds like we're all in accord with regard to not pursuing this project.
Agreed. And thank you, Michael McKinney, for that was a well-presented data on this, on the updates, and it kind of made it clear. But we do appreciate that. And so with that, I'm going to say that the board is unanimous about not moving forward on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 11, transient pool allotment transfer form with Amber Glow Ranch, and this will be with Carol and April.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet, you have a brief staff report. Essentially, for the board, this is just a information only or receive and file as you wish. But we have a member of our transient pool who has decided to sell her property and also transfer her transient pool rights. And that would be Patricia Davis, and her property is known as Amber Glow Ranch. So she has submitted the form, the required form to us. It's also in your packet. Her original transient pool allotment was 327 acre feet. She's used some of that. So the amount that they're transferring at this point is 224 acre feet. We are pursuing, following up with the new property owners. I believe April has reached out to them, but they've not yet responded with regard to updating the well registration information and monthly reporting. But for the purposes of this board meeting, you are just acknowledging this transfer. So it's basically just a receive and file.
Thank you, Carol. Bring it back to the board for any board comments.
I just have a quick question about it. Is that water, I don't quite see anywhere I read through it. Is that water sellable, or do they have to retain that as the property owner? Can they transfer that somewhere else? Just a curious question.
Only to another transient pool member, as I
That's what was
understand it.
curious. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further comment, any public comment from the floor? Any public comment on the phones? Okay. There's no board action required on this, so that concludes item number 11. And we will move on to item number 12, approval of the payment to Union Pacific Rail for trenchless crossings. And this will be with Stetson and Heather.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As part of their design work, Provost and Pritchard has identified that trenchless pipe installation is required at multiple locations along the alignment. These crossings have to comply with any requirements that the owner has or the jurisdictional agency where these crossings occur. And one of these crossings occurs across Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. And this is the location there is at Nerelia Road and Cantle Road. Union Pacific Railroad is requiring the GA to submit an application to enter into an agreement for this trenchless crossing at that intersection. And that application does have an associated fee of $755. So today, staff is just recommending the board approve the submission of the application and the payment of $755 to Union Pacific Railroad for this trench crossing.
Thank you, Heather. We'll bring it to the board for any comments or questions.
Is this something that's not within the spending authority of our general manager?
I don't believe the general manager has spending authority.
Okay. It just seems like an amount that, maybe at some point in the future we'll consider that, but an amount that's almost trivial for a project that we've already approved and there's no question about whether we need it or not. But anyhow, I'm in support of this, and as soon as we're ready to make a motion, I'm ready to make the motion.
Very good. Any public comment from the floor? Any public comment on the phones? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for approval or motion on submission of the application and payment of application fee to Union Pacific Railroad for the trenchless crossing at Nerelia Road and Cantil Road in the amount of $755.
I'll make that motion.
Chairman, I'd like to just second what Director Vallejo said. And maybe if he'd be amenable to it, he can make that part of his motion that staff would bring back at a later date some provision for spending authority for this type of thing. So just to help kind of streamline that process. But I would go ahead and second that motion.
So just for clarity, is the motion amended to include that?
Well, I think we should separate the two and just have a separate direction to staff to bring back a.
Yeah, actually, that doesn't really require a motion, and it shouldn't because it's not on the agenda now that I think about it. But we can just simply take direction and come back with an agenda item.
Fair point. Well, I'll still go ahead and second the motion. Thanks.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters.
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer. Motion carries.
Okay, item number 13, 5-year groundwater sustainability plan update. That will be with Heather through Stetson.
Yes, do we have the presentation up? Wonderful. Okay, next slide. This is a summary of what I'll be going over today to give the board and the public an update on the GST 5-year update that is coming up now. I'll go over the background, the requirements for this update, the format and organization, key dates, the coordination, and next steps, and what we're currently working on. Next slide. So to give you some background and refresh people's memory, the Indian Wells Valley GSP was submitted to DWR in January of 2020. DWR approved the GSP 2 years later in January of 2022. With that approval, it did come with 7 recommended corrective actions that DWR requested be addressed and included in the next update of the GSP. The GSP does provide a framework and a path for this valley to achieve sustainability by no later than 2040. That's a requirement of SGMA. And sustainability is achieved through the implementation of projects and management actions so that we can reduce overdraft and eliminate any undesirable results occurring in the basin. Next slide, please. The requirements for the GSP 5-year update are in the California Code of Regulations, Section 23, paragraph 356.4. DWR is requiring that GSAs, such as the Groundwater Authority, evaluate their GSPs at least every 5 years and provide a written assessment to DWR. This written assessment is what is also referred to as the GSP 5-year update. And in general, this assessment is supposed to describe how the plan is meeting the sustainability goal of the basin. To date, DWR has not published any guidance documents regarding these assessments. But so all we do have to go off of at this point is the requirements that are in the code. Next slide. This slide summarizes these requirements that are listed in Section 356.4. They include a reevaluation of the basin setting, management areas, undesirable results, and the sustainable management criteria, description of the implementation of any projects or management actions, description of the monitoring network and any data gaps, and you need to provide any new information that has been either obtained or collected or made available since the plan was adopted. So it's pretty comprehensive of an update, as you can see with those topics. I do want to note that I didn't list out every requirement that is in the regulations, but this is a good summary of what's going to be required. Next slide. The update will be prepared as a standalone document. It will reference back to the original GSP, though, and so a reader could always get additional information there. It will generally follow the same outline as the original GSP, and each section will be updated as necessary to be in compliance with the regulations. And in the document, wherever these RCAs, the recommended corrective actions, need to be addressed, they'll be directly in there in each section. The GSP will also evaluate all of our approved projects and management actions, but it is a good opportunity as we update the GSP to always also consider any other potential projects that may be worth amending the GSP to include. So I have listed just a few that are still under consideration and being discussed, like brackish water, direct injection, these more recent LADWP releases, et cetera. Next slide. This table provides some key dates and a draft schedule with these key topics for what's coming. It's broken down by chapter, so within the next few months, we should be releasing some chapters, and there's always work done in the interim on these chapters, and as we have maybe a standalone subsection or a tech memo that can be that's related to those chapters, those will be released. So this, I just don't want you to think that these dates are the only time that you'll be seeing anything related to the GSP update. We will have a full compiled draft after individual chapters are released in summer of next year, August of 2024. After that, we'll be collecting the comments there'll be a review period to collect the comments from the TAC and the PAC and the public and the board, and then Stetson will address all those comments and produce a final draft update. That would be scheduled for November of 2024. with final board approval to be considered at the December board meeting in 2024, so that we're prepared for a submittal to DWR by end of January 2025, which is when it's due. Next slide. Coordination is, of course, going to be critical as we develop this. There'll be periodic PAC and public presentations on the status, the progress of the update, and, of course, any key issues. The TAC will review technical items as they're completed. And so, as I was mentioning before, it won't necessarily be a full chapter, but before a full chapter is released, we could have other sections to have the TAC look at and review and provide input. Board presentations can, of course, be made as requested or as necessary. And any document will be posted on the website for the public to review. So just in general, public input on all matters, but particularly project and management actions, it's always encouraged. And you can direct those to the Water Resources Manager. Next slide. So this slide provides a list of some of the tasks that are currently underway that Justin is already working on. Includes the model calibration, that's with DRI, and developing the historical model runs. The review and reevaluation of the representative monitoring sites, review of our projects and management actions, evaluation of management areas, and the TAC is currently reviewing a tech memo on El Paso with regards to that subject, an evaluation of adjacent basins, and likewise the TAC is reviewing a tech memo currently on Rose Valley. So it gives you a little summary of what we're doing. It's a large task, and as I said, it is due January of 2025, which will be here pretty quickly for us. So that concludes the update from me.
Thank you, Heather. Any comments from the board? Okay, any public comment from the floor?
This is Dave Janis, PAC Chairman. Heather and the rest of the staff, looking at the schedule it's in the packet as chart number 7. Do we expect the PAC to be tasked to review introductory chapters or some preliminary efforts to get a lead on this prior to January of 2024? So we've got three regular meetings left in this year that we currently do not have tasking for. It would be good if we could get a start on this. As Heather pointed out, the schedule is going to be clobbered. It took us a long time to go through these the first time. And anything that's available for review prior to that during the rest of this calendar year would be welcome.
Understood, yes. I don't know at this point what in the next 2 months we'll be having for the PAC to review. But I can keep that in mind that you have those meetings scheduled.
Yeah. Yeah. And Heather, I'll jump in real quick too, Heather. This is Steve, David. Good comment, David. And what certainly is, that's on our mind, is to try to get some of these some of these basic upfront chapters that can be written now to the PAC early for you guys to review. So we will do that. We'll make every effort to do that. We just the engineer that we had working on drafting those sections gave notice yesterday that Friday is his last day. So we're reorganizing to get those done. But our intent is exactly what you described, is to get some of the early sort of the general sections of the GSP update to the PAC to review. Technical stuff, as Heather mentioned, technical stuff is already going to the TAC for their review. So we'll get you on board.
Great, Steve. And to try to flesh that out a little bit further, we've got our October meeting is in 2 weeks. I do not anticipate, unless you give me another opinion, that we'll have anything to review at that meeting. Is that correct?
Not for the GSP, I don't believe.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, I have a question. Excuse me. There are several small agricultural interests that have signed up for the transient pool fallowing program. The years have gone by and nothing to date has been written about fallowing. And this is a grave concern for this valley, is how this is going to happen. And it's something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be begun looking at now because it's very complicated. And I bring this up to you, Heather and Steve. We talked about it long ago when the GSP was first written, but that was almost 5 years ago. And some of the people signed up for the transient pool 5 years ago, and their water consumption allotments are slowly running out. So I hope you can address that.
Thank you, Judy.
I'll just mention, Judy, real quick. This is Steve. Just mention real quick. We have not forgotten about it. Capital Corps, which has been, I think you all know, has been a tremendous asset to the authority. We've been working through Capital Corps, Jeff Simonetti, primarily looking for opportunities to get some money to support transitioning out of the transient pool. And fallowing, the impacts of potential fallowing. So we continue to work on it. There's not much new right now. Some of the funding that was available has kind of dried. I shouldn't say, bad time to say that, but it's kind of dried up. But we are continuing to work on it, and we'll add it to the list to give you a report on a regular basis as to where we are, what's out there, what we can do. We'll work with Capital Corps on that.
Okay, I'd like to point out again that I am Vice Chairman of the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District. And you might think about approaching the district our district to see if there's something that we can do in partnership with you, because we are exploring at the present time applying for grants whereby we can start collecting and having native seeds available. We haven't done this yet, but I offer this to you as an idea to think about. And if you wish to go forward with it, you can contact our district office. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, any other public comment on the floor? Any public comment on the phones? None? Okay, there's no action required by the board on this item. So with that, if there's no further comment from the board members, we will move on to item number 14, the Water Resources Manager Report, and this will be with Stetson.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Chairman Heyman. This is Steve Johnson again from Stetson. First, I want to thank Heather for that report. It was awesome, very, very good. It basically is the bulk of the Water Resource Manager report right now is Heather's presentation. So the rest of the report, as we have done in the past, is in writing. I'm going to be very brief, just to hit a couple of highlights. It's always good to know about money. So under the grants, Prop 1, Prop 68, we have about 27,000 approved by DWR, just awaiting the checks. We have about another 29,000 that is under review that we believe they'll be approved very shortly. And so we'll be receiving that. It's pretty much wrapping up Prop 68 and Prop 1 money on our reimbursements. We still have the retention money. It's over about $220,000 that has gone through DWR review. They made some revisions on the report that was the final report that was filed to get our retention money. That's the 10% retention that they kept. So we expect that very soon too. So there's $220,000 coming there. Under the implementation grant for the pipeline, we've got multiple invoices in under review right now. DWR has reviewed and provided some minor comments. Invoice 2, 3, and 4. We're up to about $1.8 million that we're waiting for reimbursement on from DWR under this grant. So That will be a very nice influx of money as soon as we get those paid. And we're expecting those pretty much anytime. They probably won't all come in at once. There's 3 invoices, but over the next month or 2, we should be seeing those invoices be paid. Under the Water Resource Manager report, we have recycled water, we have imported water. We've talked about that quite a bit. Details on the imported water project, all of the Provost and Pritchard work, both for the right-of-way and the pipeline design, and the environmental work is all, and the environmental work also is all included in the update. In the update that we provide of the report, we include next steps so you can see what's coming up and where we're at. Shallow well mitigation program. Carol, our general manager, will provide a short report on the emergency application we received on the Halpin well. I'll just give you a brief report on the Byerly well that also has been made application for assistance under the shallow well mitigation program. Right now, the application is still incomplete. We've got a lot of information, but we have not received a key item, which is actually the evaluation of the cause of the well failure from the owner. So we're waiting on that. I would expect we would have something back for the November meeting on that. We provided last meeting a schedule for the 2023 annual report. It actually detailed drafts and review presentations and such. So you've got that. Under miscellaneous items, that is generally the work that G. Moran works on. There's a written update for all of that work, including update to the LADWP releases. They're back making some more releases, not very much, but they're still making releases. And there is a tabulation in the written report on the LADWP releases. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments from the board or questions for Steve?
I just have one comment. Steve mentioned the Byerly well. I would like to see something added to the agenda at approving what PAC had submitted as a program to look at wells and to go in and maybe make a revision to our current program. So I'd like to see if we could add that so we could discuss that next month.
Okay, hearing no further board comments, any public comment from the floor? Any public comment from the phones? Okay. Moving on to item number 15, General Manager's report. This will be with Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item is just a quick update on the communications and engagement plan. As I mentioned earlier, we have a digital media specialist within RGS who is working with us on our website. In fact, he's working with both April and me to see what changes might be in order and how we can make it more user-friendly, how we can start incorporating more information to provide more education to those who visit the site and make it more accessible to everyone. We're hoping to have at least a preview of it by the end of the year, if not a working version of it. So that's definitely in the works, and we're excited to see where it goes, what he comes up with. I also have developed a template for and I've told you a little bit about this, a template for a quick, I don't want to call it a newsletter, more like a little electronic news bulletin that can be issued following each board meeting, just to provide the highlights of the board actions and news each month. And I plan to do an introductory version of that following this board meeting, probably within the week or so. And so I'll send it to you. You can tell me what you think of it, and if it looks good, then we'll do it on a regular basis. I think that's it for C and E. I will defer to, I think, do we still have Capital Corps on the line?
Yes, Carol, it's Michael McKinney.
Do you want to give some highlights, Michael, of your report?
Yes, I'll give two major highlights. First of all, regarding the interconnection pipeline project, we have in September, we had inquiries and questions regarding the WRDA 24 application from both Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla's office. Those questions have been answered. I am happy to report that Senator Butler is settling into the offices, and she has decided to retain most of the staff. There are some questions, of course, ongoing about being the junior senator and not having a subcommittee chairmanship. Will she be able to retain the budget amount to maintain all of the staff? We're hopeful that she will, especially on the water side. Second of all, I will point out that on the federal legislative updates, of course, we had a couple of weeks that were very tumultuous in Washington, D.C., especially for the authority, the passing of Senator Feinstein, as well as the decision to vacate the speakership of the House of Representatives. That has set us back a little bit. Both of those action items, out of respect for the offices and what they were going through at the time, we've kind of halted on business items at this particular moment in time and focused more on personal items and providing condolences to Senator Feinstein's staff. Also welcoming Senator Butler, and then also strongly disagreeing with the actions by some of the House members to vacate Speaker McCarthy. On the state side of the House, I am happy to report that yesterday, Governor Newsom has signed into law AB 779, which we have talked a lot about over the period. I thought I would give a quick overview of this. It will require some implementation on the part of the authority, given the adjudication lawsuit that is going on, but also let you know this bill takes effect on 1/1/2024. And then I will turn it over to Keith for some opinion and some interpretation of it. Essentially, AB 779 made various changes to comprehensive groundwater adjudications and SGMA to deal with transparency, as well as to ensure the representation of small farmers in disadvantaged communities. And then lastly, in maintaining the groundwater sustainability plan. Basically, what is required under 779 is that the GSA will have the requirements to post a lot of the documentation relative to the adjudication on its website, as well as hold particular meetings or public meetings necessary to help explain the adjudication process and what is going on. The other thing that is of note in here is that before a judgment can be entered into, the court must find now that the water use of small farmers in disadvantaged communities have been considered, and also make a finding that the judgment does not substantially impair the ability of the authority to comply with SGMA or achieve sustainable groundwater. So there has to be both findings before a judgment can be made. It was indeed directly related to some of the concerns that small farmers were not being represented in the adjudication process and were being defaulted or pushed out of the adjudication proceedings. Second of all, some last minute amendments to this that were done by both DWR and the State Water Resources Control Board basically clarified the fact that under SGMA, the court can refer the matter for investigation pursuant to Section 2001 of the Water Code to a joint review of those two agencies. And basically that is to comply with comments regarding the GSP. And then lastly, on this particular one, it does require that during the adjudication, parties are prohibited from extracting water from the basin, from using new or increased groundwater to establish a new claim of prescription during the adjudication proceeding, except as authorized by the court. And further, it requires that there be a finding that the GSP is being maintained during the adjudication proceeding. And from there, I will turn it over to Keith and let him give a little bit more comprehensive explanation.
Sure, and that was pretty comprehensive, but I'll let me add a few words. First off, I want to make it clear to the public, and I know the board already knows this, that this was a significant achievement on the part of Capitol Corps and also district staff who and some board members who put a lot of effort into making this happen. We were up against much better funded and much more numerous parties that were opposing this piece of legislation. I think at one point I had to chuckle because the list of opponents was, a whole page, and when the proponents of it was basically us in the county of Santa Barbara, I think. So, this was a definite David and Goliath situation. So good job, Michael, on this. This AB 779 is very good news for this basin. It's not an exaggeration to say that by the end of this, our current situation with the adjudication and moving forward with the pipeline, that was all very much in play and very much considered by the state legislature because of comments that were brought forward to them when they were considering this particular bill. The reason it's good news is that it should result in the adjudication process that is currently playing out being significantly streamlined, which should have good cost savings for the valley. Let me explain what I mean. So just to refresh everybody's recollection, the groundwater adjudication, you've heard me say it before, is a determination about how much groundwater can be pumped by individual pumpers in the valley. Sometimes that's called water rights allocations. The adjudication process, as we've said many times, is expensive and lengthy, and there are significant economic barriers for participation by many folks, as we've discovered in this case. Adjudications can take up to 10 years. In fact, the ones I have personally been involved with have taken that long and involve significant legal fees. Before SGMA, one of the issues that a court needed to decide in an adjudication first was the safe yield of the basin. In other words, the court had to determine the amount of water available to pump before it could determine each individual party's share of that water. So that total amount you can pump is sometimes called the safe yield. Now, once SGMA was adopted, the Groundwater Authority was delegated the responsibility of determining the safe yield as part of preparing the GSP, and was also delegated the responsibility of coming up with projects to make sure that the safe yield was respected. And as everybody here knows, the GA did that with the participation of all the pumpers as part of its groundwater sustainability plan, and we've been made very aware that it was at significant expense and cost. The plan, as you know, was then reviewed and approved by the experts at the Department of Water Resources, which is a state agency. The state determined that the plan was accurate, that the safe yield described there was based on the best available science. So what happened after that was there were some pumpers in the valley that hoped to use the adjudication to get the court to make a new determination of what the safe yield would be that might be different than what was made by the GA and the plan. And obviously this presented a potential to significantly waste a lot of taxpayer money that had been put into adopting that number, and as we would be essentially forced to redo the process in the court. So that was the issue that was teed up and described to the state legislature in the context of AB 770. And I believe that one of the purposes of this is to make sure that the effort in the technical expense and effort that we put into adopting the GSP is not duplicated or rendered useless somehow by the court. So the key things, as Michael pointed out, the AB 779 requires the court to invite an expert representative from the DWR and or the State Water Resources Control Board to provide technical assistance or testimony during an adjudication proceeding. Specifically, again, this would be targeted to providing opinions to the court about whether or not any kind of proposed groundwater allocation scheme that the court is coming up with is consistent with the GSP and the technical findings in the GSP. So that helps to ensure that the court doesn't reach technical decisions that interfere with the implementation of the GSP, such as in our case, the pipeline project. What I think that means as a practical matter is that we should not be spending time now, having to spend time and money, all of us, litigating the technical issues that have already been decided in the GSP. Instead, we can proceed directly to the allocation issue of the adjudication, which I think is a great benefit to everybody. The second thing that the bill addresses that is of particular concern financially for the GA is it's actually a subject that the district has brought up correctly and complained about multiple times, which is the district's currently the only one paying the fee. They're the only ones who have actually stepped up and done that. And, you know, obviously they should be commended for that, but there are other parties out there that are not paying the fee. And the nice thing about AB 779 is, you know, remember previously we had this problem of we ordered them to pay it, and then the next step was what? We had to take it to court and get an injunction, and that's where we are right now. Well, AB 779 flips it, and it says basically it mandates that producers have to comply with the sustainability plan, in other words, pay the fee, or they have to go get an injunction from the court to excuse them from paying the fee. And which, by the way, I think one of them has already tried and failed to do. So, so that should make the ability to get the non-paying parties to pay much quicker and much more efficiently. So that's good news too. The rest of the bill, I think, will be of tremendous interest and for small pumpers and small farmers in the valley. AB 779 requires that the court to have considered the water use of and accessibility of water for small farmers and disadvantaged communities when it enters into the judgment. So that's good. We have a lot of those in this valley, so that's good news for them. And then the last piece of it, I think Michael alluded to, was an informational piece. I know that we've gotten comments back from the PAC that we have not been provided public information as well as we could. The state legislature apparently agrees with that in general because they're asking us to not only post all of the information about that's developed in the adjudication on a website so that the public has access to it, but also we are to host public meetings explaining the adjudication process and the status of the adjudication to the public, which is partly what I'm doing right now, in fact. So we're already implementing, I suppose. And I look forward to periodically providing a report in that regard. So I would say that this is a very good thing, and we're very pleased with that the governor signed it and that Member Wilson sponsored this. And that concludes my report.
Okay, and I think that's all, Michael, correct on the legislative update? And,
That's correct.
Okay, and for your report. So the last item that I have is just a quick report on shallow well emergency assistance. We received a request from Mr. Halpin for emergency assistance in addition to his application for assistance under the shallow well mitigation program. So in accordance with our policy, his request was reviewed by me and by our chair, and his request for reimbursement of up to $6,000 in costs associated with securing an emergency water supply were approved. So we are just awaiting now his submittal of receipts. And he did tell us that he ultimately found that the costs were going to be considerably lower than what he anticipated. But we don't have the final figures yet, and we're also still working with him on the larger application for well mitigation assistance.
Thank you, Carol. And I just want to say again, thank you to Capital Corps and Michael McKinney on the results of 779, and that is a tremendous attribute or result for the GA. So, and next we will move on to the item number 16, Policy Advisory Committee report. This will be with Dave Janis.
Good afternoon, folks. Excuse me. The PAC had one main task at our last meeting, and we've been working on this for roughly 3 meetings, and it was recommendations for board consideration regarding the shallow well mitigation program, specifically the recommendation regarding fair and reasonable expectations for documentation on the demonstration of well maintenance under the shallow well mitigation program. We came up with 2 documents that were approved by the full PAC. A lot of good work by the subcommittee that each time they refined it, and we ended up with what I think is a good product. The PAC provides 2 documents and recommendation. Those 2 documents, the first one is the title. These are long but descriptive titles, so I'm going to read them. Summary of groundwater well failure due to declining water levels and or declining water quality occurring as a result of declining water levels. That is a document that provides many factors for consideration of well owners in the valley and also for the Groundwater Authority Board and staff in assessing those documentation results and all the factors that go into it. Additionally, one of our recommendations was for providing clear definition of terms in the program, and that document does it. So it's a 2-page document. It's very concise, and it provides a lot of good background information, and it should provide the background for one of the things we recommended in the C&E plan, which was a fact sheet. So a fact sheet on this issue, we think should be focused on the information presented in that document in a way, and it was presented purposely in a way that we expect de minimis and small well owners should be able to understand, so they don't have language that they may not understand. The second document was all answered most specifically the PAC recommendation for requirements with respect to de minimis well owners that may qualify for the program. It lists the exact factors and basically required and desired terms so that they have the information and the data, and it's to be used. It should be the basis for perhaps modification to the application form more clearly for them, as well as the general information for all de minimis well owners. So those are the 2 specific documents. They got full PAC support. I will comment again on, in developing this process, I've reported at previous 2 meetings, but I wanted to make sure that was understood. This document was these documents were limited to de minimis well owners who are not the only well owners subjected or potential applicants for the shallow well program. It was viewed by the subcommittee, and the full PAC agreed that that was outside of the scope of our experience to address. We were familiar enough with the smaller and de minimis well owners and wells such that we felt that was a place. So we weren't going to do co-ops and largers. We weren't going to do large pumpers, et cetera, but all of those would in fact qualify under the shallow well mitigation program. So we did not answer that portion of the tasking because we felt it was outside our scope of familiarity and authority. However, I would say that this task that we did adopt for the de minimis well owners, that's over 95% of the wells in the valley. So we got all the main ones, and they are the most shallow generally. They are the most likely to go dry or suffer degradations due to water quality. That's all I have for the PAC report. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Dave. Any questions from the board?
I don't have any questions. I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. They made these suggestions in the end, so I'd like to see us review these next month and maybe put these into implementation as a board.
The changes that the
PAC
PAC is currently done?
Correct.
So that we can review it?
Yeah, I'd like to review this next month and discuss it, and then take action on it and implement it if we could, or make changes if necessary, or at least look at it.
Is that something that you had intentions or plans to bring it those changes to the board? Or-
Well, we were asked to provide a recommendation, and we have done so. And we think this is information that perhaps should go on the website in the form of fact sheet. It should inform the application form for de minimis well owners. And that's up to the staff and the board to determine what to do with this. That's our recommendations that we considered at length. A lot of subcommittee time and 3-pack meeting review time.
Is this on? Okay. Yeah, I was saying not that you need my concurrence on it, but I agree. I think that this would be a good thing for Stetson and maybe Carol's office to review and make a staff recommendation at the next meeting and just formalize that process a little bit. Okay. Either way, I was going to say next day in the back.
Okay, any other public comments or any other comments from the board? Okay, we'll move to public comment from the floor. Judy, go ahead.
As chairman of the subcommittee, it is the subcommittee's intent, and I believe it is the PAC's intent, that Chuck is right, that you do review this and use it. It will expedite the process for both the well owner and for Stetson in the review of their applications. It's totally based on fact. It's clear cut. So we offer it to you for your use. That's why we did it. And since I am up here and you didn't call for public comment after the discussion of AB 779, I do have a question for Keith. My question is, what's the definition of a small farm, a small agricultural enterprise? Because obviously a small farm in the Indian Wells Valley is not the same probably as a small farm in the Central Valley. And I believe that might be an area of concern. Thank you.
Keith, I can answer that. It's Michael McKinney if you'd like. I have it in front of me.
Very good. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Michael.
because I can't remember where we landed on that.
It is actually, Judy, in the statute in AB 779. Disadvantaged community means essentially the same as all of the disadvantaged community definitions that are in the Health and Safety Code. That for the Indian Wells Valley practically means that the city of Ridgecrest is not considered a disadvantaged community. However, all of the outlying areas around the city of Ridgecrest are, all of the unincorporated areas, the Inyo Kern area, etc. Small farmer is essentially someone who makes between $10,000 and $400,000 in gross sales, as referenced in the Department of Food and Agriculture's California Underserved and Small Producers Program. So it has a dollar cap on it of $400,000 per annum in sales.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, any other public comment from the floor? Any public comment from the phones? Okay, thank you, Dave. And with that, we will move to item number 17, date of the next meeting, which will be November 8th, 2023. And this meeting is now adjourned.